Since I've been old enough to think for myself, I've varied only slightly, if at all, in my core beliefs. But over the years, the label I've used in defining my political affinity has changed, primarily because either the particular group changes its stance, or I learn more about the group and realize there are too many contradictions with my beliefs. Long story short, my transition thus far goes like this. I first identified myself as Republican, don't laugh, then moved around and settled on conservative independent, then moved some more and landed on what I referred to as American nationalism, then libertarian, but recently I've become most enamored with anti-statism. I think anti-statism really sums up the beliefs about politics that I've always held, and it's good to finally have a name for it. Now, I hate to ride on anyone's coattails, but YouTube reporter Confederal Socialist had a significant role in opening my eyes. Check out my subscriptions if you're interested in what he has to say. He'll give you a much more intelligent and in-depth discussion than I possibly could. So, I know many of you have heard the accolades concerning anarchy or anti-statism. I just wanted to posit a couple of my thoughts concerning theism in America and their relationship with anti-statism. Maybe some of my fellow Christians and fellow proud Americans are on the fence, but are having a little trouble fully embracing anti-statism. Well, maybe this will push you in the right direction. This is not necessarily meant to be persuasive, but I would like to highlight a couple of points that some folks may have not thought about. And this is just broad strokes. For more detail, I'm sure an internet search will yield vast quantities of information on the subjects. Well, my first point is that I don't believe that theism and anti-statism are necessarily mutually exclusive, Christianity in particular. After all, I am a Christian and an anti-statist. Live with it, atheists. God bless you, little rascals. So, I am living proof that they can coexist, at least academically speaking. But more to the point, God gave us free will. So from a Christian standpoint, we are free to make the choice to follow Christ or not. We are subject to God's law and God's judgment. Man's law should not be held greater than God's law. And when a terrestrial power, i.e. the state, takes away our choice, I think that interferes with God's plan. I mean, if one is forced to do what's right, and it's not his free choice, then that sort of defeats the purpose. Additionally, man should not be judged by other men. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Does that sound familiar? Moreover, I would argue that the very definition of the state directly subverts 3 of the 10 commandments. First, thou shalt not kill. And I'm not just talking about the death penalty, but all laws are ultimately backed by threat of death. Picture a small infraction of the law that results in a fine, a law with which you may or may not agree. Then if you refuse to pay, jail. But then you refuse to go to jail. Well, then force is applied. And so then you try to escape. Well, I think you see my point. Just ask yourself how soon the guns of the state come out when enforcing the law, even the small ones. Secondly, thou shalt have no other gods before me. However, simply put, the state expects subjugation to the state over everything else. After all, the law is the law, including having our tax dollars spent in ways we might, from a Christian standpoint, object. Which brings me to the 3rd commandment in question. Thou shalt not steal. One word on this one, taxes. I don't think further explanation is warranted. So, as a Christian, I see no contradiction in Christianity and anti-statism. In fact, one could argue that true Christianity would support anti-statism over an actual state. Now, my second point concerning country begins like this. I believe that the United States is the greatest country in the history of man. Now, this is strictly my opinion, and some may disagree, but our relatively young nation became the last remaining world superpower in about 200 years, compared to the other centuries-old societies. I attribute this directly to the Constitution of the United States. Now, don't get me wrong, this document is not some magic scroll, as our friend Confederal Socialist likes to mockingly refer. but it did set forth a school of thought that propelled this country to greatness. It's really quite simple. The Constitution limits the powers of government. I think it just didn't go far enough. For whatever reason, the Founding Fathers saw a need for some government. I'm sure some had selfish reasons and others had truly altruistic reasons. But what's done is done. The fact remains, though, that our government had, and I stress had, the most limited power of all the major nations. It wasn't until the U.S. became a major world player that the government started accumulating more and more power. And guess what? The rest of the world has caught up with us in terms of innovation and progress. I would say this is a direct result of government interference in the free market. The point is, the philosophy of limited government and individual liberty is what made the U.S. great. And if we take this concept to its full potential, the result is anti-statism and true liberty for all.